Today's number 10 most urgent vulnerability is CVE 2026-18556 in Enable N-Central, and it earns the spot for one simple reason. This is not just a theoretical high-severity bug. It is listed in CISA's Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. The flaw is an authentication bypass, which means the normal boundary between an unauthenticated requester and protected functionality may not hold under certain conditions. On the Daily Ranked CVE Brief, we rank what to patch first using real exploitation signal, CISA KEV, first EPSS, and CVSS, not just scary headlines. This one is a 7.4 high, not a perfect 10, but the exploitation signal changes the priority. If N-Central is part of your environment, this deserves immediate attention. The official NVD description is short but important. Authentication bypass using an alternate path or channel vulnerability in Enable N-Central allows authentication bypass. This issue affects N-Central through 2026.1. The weakness category is CVE-2026, which is authentication bypass using an alternate path or channel. In plain English, a system may correctly require login on the main route, but another route, interface workflow or communication channel does not enforce that same check. The security failure is not that passwords are weak. It is that the application may provide a way around the authentication gate. For defenders, that matters because authentication is the front door to sensitive functions. If a separate path fails to validate identity consistently, the rest of the access model can be undermined. Verdict: this is a high-severity vulnerability that should be treated as urgent where N-Central is deployed, especially if any interface is reachable from untrusted networks. The CVSS vector is 7.4 high, network attack vector, high attack complexity, no privileges required, no user interaction required, unchanged scope, high confidentiality impact, high integrity impact, and no availability impact. The two metrics that matter most are remote reachability and no required credentials. A remote unauthenticated issue is always concerning because the attacker does not need a foothold or a valid account before attempting to reach the vulnerable surface. The high attack complexity matters too. CVSS is saying exploitation is not necessarily simple or reliable in every environment. But complexity is not a defense, especially when CISA says the CVE is known exploited. The real-world danger is the KEV status. CISA's Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog is not a list of every bug that might someday matter. It is a signal that exploitation has been observed. That does not tell us who is attacking, how widespread activity is, or what exact technique is being used, and we should not invent those details. But it does mean defenders should move this out of the normal quarterly patching mindset. The CVSS impact profile also tells us what is at stake: high confidentiality impact and high integrity impact. In practical terms, that means successful bypassive authentication could expose information that should require login, and could allow changes where the product trusts the requester as authenticated. Availability is listed as no impact in the CVSS vector, so the primary concern is access and trust, not service disruption. Conceptually, the attack path starts with reachability. The CVSS vector says attack vector network, so the vulnerable condition can be approached over a network connection. It also says privileges required none and user interaction none, so the attacker does not need an existing N-Central account and does not need to trick a user into clicking anything. The weakness category gives the defensive mental model. There may be an alternate path or channel where authentication is not enforced in the same way as the expected login-protected path. That is why exposure management matters so much. If N-Central is reachable from broad network locations, there are more opportunities for someone to probe for inconsistent authentication behavior. The right defensive response is to reduce who can reach it, then patch the product. To check whether you are affected, start with your asset inventory. Identify every Enable N-Central instance, including production, standby, test, and older deployments that may not be in the main patch cycle. The NVD description says the issue affects N-Central through 2026.1. Do not infer a fixed version from that sentence alone. Use the vendor's security update for exact remediation guidance and version status. Next, classify exposure. Is the N-Central interface reachable from the internet, from partner networks, from remote access infrastructure, or only from tightly controlled internal segments? Also check DNS records, reverse proxies, load balancers, firewall roles, and remote access paths that may make the service reachable indirectly. If a system is on or before the affected range and is broadly reachable, treat it as a priority. The primary fix is to follow Enable's security guidance and update affected N-Central deployments to a fixed state. Because we are not relying on the contents of the advisory here, I'm not going to name a patch level or build number that was not provided in the data. Use the vendor advisory as the source of truth. While patching is underway, reduce exposure. Limit access to trusted networks, VPNs, or management segments where that fits your architecture. Remove unnecessary public reachability. Enforce strong identity controls where supported. But remember, identity controls do not fully compensate for an authentication bypass in the application itself. Also review recent administrative actions and configuration changes. If you find an exposed affected instance, consider whether a deeper investigation is warranted before assuming patching alone closes the incident. For detection, focus on authentication consistency. In application, proxy, web, and access logs, look for successful access to protected areas without the expected preceding login event. Watch for requests to unusual paths, alternate interfaces, or channels that do not match normal administrative workflows. Establish what normal looks like: expected administrator accounts, expected source IP ranges, expected maintenance windows, and expected login patterns. Then alert on deviations. Concrete signals to review include new account creation, role or permission changes, configuration changes, failed and successful authentication anomalies, and access from source networks that do not normally administer N-Central. If logs are routed to a CIEM, create temporary heightened monitoring around affected instances until remediation is complete. The goal is not to detect a specific exploit string, it is to catch authentication and authorization behavior that does not line up. Bottom line, CVE 2026-18556 is an Enable N-Central authentication bypass, tracked as CVE-288, affecting N-Central through 2026.1, according to the NVD description. The CVSS score is 7.4 high, driven by remote reachability, no required credentials, no user interaction, and high confidentiality and integrity impact. The reason it is today's number 10 is the real-world signal. It is in CISA's Known Exploited Vulnerabilities catalog. If you run N-Central, inventory it, confirm your version against the vendor advisory, reduce exposure, patch according to vendor guidance, and monitor for abnormal authenticated activity. This is the Daily Ranked CVE Brief. What to patch first, ranked by real exploitation signal every day. Subscribe for tomorrow's ranked breakdown and see the full ranked report, linked in the description.